Welcome to the Spiritual and Empowerment Living with Tia podcast, a sacred place and resource for spiritually centered women who want to go from the mundane to the magical life, for overcoming fear and doubt, reconnecting with the goddess, understanding messages from spirit, and uncovering your spiritual gifts so you can finally live the life you deserve. Hello, spiritual trailblazers, and welcome back. I am so excited for this episode. It's the first time I'm doing this, and I love these conversations, so I'm so interested to see where this leads. Witchy movies you need to possibly rewatch or watch with real life witch Hilary Parry. So she is a tarot reader, witch, mentor, editor, and teacher. She has been reading tarot for over 21 years, 13 years professionally. She was the winner of the Teresa Reed, the Tarot Lady, Tarot Apprentice Contest in 2011, and has taught classes on tarot and spell work at the Tarot School's Reader Studio in Bridge Closet Beltane Festival. She writes a weekly blog on tarot at her website, tarotbyhilary.com, and has been featured in Maximum Magazine and BuzzFeed. Expert topics include but are not limited to tarot, divination, magic, tarot and spell work, meditation, mentorship, predictions. And you can visit Hilary at tarotbyhilary.com. The link is in this episode's description. Hilary, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about talking about some of these movies.
Me too. And I'm so glad that we were able to connect. Thank God, Goddess, for technology.
Right?
Because I think these conversations are better when I have someone talking about it as with me as opposed to just a monologue. So thank you
Right.
for that.
Right. Just speaking out into the universe, not sure if anyone's listening, not sure if anything's resonating. It's complete trust fall. So yeah, I love having a conversation about this instead of just like, oh, does anyone hear me? Is this mic on?
Right, yes. And as Mercury retrograde already had technical issues with
Oh
recording, had to
no.
re-record. So I'm just like, please
We are
let this
tempting
go
fate.
well.
We are
Yes,
tempting fate here, recording during a Mercury retrograde, but it is what it will be. So,
exactly. So the first movie, The Crucible. And so when I think of this movie, this brings back grade school because that's when I first watched. Oh, I'm sorry, not grade school. Maybe it was high school where I first watched The Crucible.
mm-hmm.
I remember being young, so maybe ninth grade. But for me, I also feel like it's a coming of age movie for witches or just people who are into spirituality.
Yeah,
Thoughts?
yeah. Um, I think I mean like the whole concept of the Crucible, the original, script play that was written by Arthur Miller, this version of it, if we're talking about the version with Winona Ryder and Daniel Day-Lewis, I mean, if you need an excuse to watch the Crucible again, Daniel Day-Lewis as what's his name, Proctor.
Yeah, John
Yeah,
Proctor.
John Proctor. Like it's my name. Like, come on,
Yes.
come on, and like forget about the witchiness, right? Like just watch it for Daniel Day-Lewis. And oh gosh, who played his wife? Was it Oh, I'm gonna forget her name, but she's
Let's
incredible as
see.
well.
I have.
We should have brought this up before we
Oh,
started talking about
Joan.
it.
I have IMDb up as a backup here.
Joan
It's
Allen.
Joan. What happened?
Joan Allen.
Yep, Joan Allen. Yes.
Yes, I got it. I still got it. But like I just remember from the Crucible, like just when the Crucible was originally written, which was, yes, the setting is the Salem witch trials and, accusations and hysteria. But it was originally written by Arthur Miller during the time of McCarthyism and like the witch hunts of, the McCarthy trials. So, you're going back to that portion of American history, which is super interesting, but you're also getting like this sense of like, okay, who's the real criminal here? Who's the real witch? And it's like this whole concept of the othering. I mean, in the Salem witch trials, there were very few actual witches, if not
Right.
any, that were accused and found guilty and executed. So it's super interesting, especially whenever you come to that movie for the first time and thinking about what you're going through as a teenager, especially if you're a metaphysical person, um, and you're seeing things that aren't there and you're hearing things that aren't there, and all you want to do is fit in. And then you see this movie and you're just like, huh, okay, well, fitting in means accusing everyone of witchcraft in this
Mm,
sense of the movie. So
mm-hmm.
it really gives you maybe a greater sense of who am I? Is it okay to not fit in? Because if fitting in
Mm.
means this, I don't want to fit in, you know?
Right. Yes, exactly. So it states here in IMDb, a Salem resident attempts to frame her ex-lover's wife for being a witch in the middle of 1692 witchcraft trials. So yeah, it's very interesting that, and I love that you brought up the point about fitting in, because here it is, a guy who did something he wasn't supposed to be doing,
Mm-hmm.
and his wife is taking it out on really the other woman more so than the guy, to the point where she's accusing her of witchcraft. And yes, and I love that scene. My name, like yes, he does suffer,
Right.
but when we look at it from the perspective of the witch, I mean, it was his name getting tarnished, but he could have moved to another village. Whereas with the witches, they were going to die. Um, so I think this was a really good movie for uh, witches and the like, to really understand that a lot comes with the territory of taking on the name of witch or
Mm,
spiritualist or occultist. And sometimes that, a lot of times, it means that we aren't with the crowd.
right.
So what could that look like? And we would have to develop thick skin. And all right, are we going to develop our own sisterhood or coven, what have you? So it's so many layers to this movie. Of course, the amazing acting. Like yes, Daniel Day Lewis, Ryder, and another actor or actress that really stuck out was the Rebecca Nurse. She was the truly the most innocent person.
Yes.
And
Yes.
still, and it just goes with the saying, damned if you do, damned if you don't. So you
Mm-hmm.
might as well do what you are scared to do.
Right. Do what pleases you, because goodness knows people are going to talk about you whether they want whether you want them to or not, and what they
Hmm.
say about you is actually none of your business.
Right. Right. Exactly. And it also goes to show how fear can really play a huge part in society, because as you were saying, there really weren't many witches that were killed. It was the fear of being a witch and the power, like I said, everything that comes with the mantle of claiming to be a witch.
Right.
So it's so interesting.
Yeah. And that came out, when did that come out? 1996, was
It
it?
came out, yes, 1996.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up now too. And I remember, I think one of the judges, or the judge that comes in, I think it's maybe Fisher Stevens. Is that right? I remember him being in it too. So I love him. I just love the acting in it.
Mhm.
And just the, like, and I don't know, just the outside person coming in and how they were evaluating who's a witch, who's not a witch, and it was all purely hearsay, purely pointing fingers, and and
Mhm.
just the hysteria that comes up, with the masses. The more people that got involved, the bigger and the crazier it got, and the more people got accused. So
Mhm.
it is kind of, that lesson of, maybe you should mind your business, maybe you should stay out of things that you don't understand, or that you weren't a part of to begin with. And there's also an excellent book, I think, by Stacy Schaefer, I believe, which talks about the witches and the Salem witch trials in kind of a documentary style. And she, I believe, wrote a book on Cleopatra and the life of Cleopatra. So I think that would be a really great resource
Mm.
for anyone that watches The Crucible and wants to kind of know fact from fiction about the Salem witch trials of 1692.
And I love when you mentioned determining a witch. You know, the guy comes, he's trying to determine who's a witch. We see that now where, people are asking, okay, so what makes you a witch? Or how
Mm-hmm.
do you define witch? Or okay, I'm not a witch if I don't do this. So it's very interesting, even though he's not there for good intentions. But now so many people are trying to understand what's a witch. And I know this is another topic, but then we have sort of the gatekeepers to tell,
Right.
so it's interesting how still that conversation is going on of what makes someone a witch.
Right. And it can definitely be um one a tool to understand, okay, well, I see things, does that make me a witch? Or I use tarot cards, does that mean that I'm a witch? And not necessarily. I think it's about labeling what you consider yourself to be. Or some people are still afraid of the term psychic, and they're not comfortable calling themselves psychic. They
Hmm.
call themselves intuitive instead. So I think it's very much about reclaiming the labels that make sense to us, and also not using labels to gatekeep
Hmm.
from people that are looking to be more spiritual or looking into witchcraft as a spirituality.
Absolutely. So what would you say would be for you your biggest takeaway from the Crucible?
Oof, gosh.
I know so many, it's
There's
so many.
so many. Oh my
Or the first
goodness.
one that comes to mind.
Don't fuck around with another man's wife. I
Yeah, I
mean,
know.
or another man's wife, or another woman's husband. I
Hmm.
mean, and also, oh gosh, I mean, it's a great parable um about knowing yourself, really, and knowing
Mm.
what is important to you. I mean, I keep on going back to that pretty much um the climax of the story, which is John Proctor refusing
Mhm.
to submit and going basically to the gallows for it, and saying, because it's my name, because I'll never
Right.
have another. So it is very much about reclaiming, I think, your story,
Mm.
or your version of your story too, because there was a lot of that going on in the Crucible, where the group of teen girls were pointing and saying this and saying that, and this person's a witch, and this person bewitched me, or this person pinched me in the middle of mass, or you know what have you. I mean, they're telling their side of their story, but what's fiction, what's not? it's really
Mhm.
it's really about determining what story you will take on yourself, and how you will reclaim your name or clear your name.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I that totally resonates with me. And as you were talking, I was thinking about the guy that they put stones on top of his chest,
Giles
and he,
Corey, yeah.
yeah, he wouldn't give in. You're right. It's all about the story and standing up for what you believe in, even if it means the ultimate sacrifice. Because yeah, our names mean a lot. For me, I see the big society suppression.
Mm,
We have a guy here who he's married, and maybe he doesn't believe in a closed marriage, and clearly his wife did. So, but society says no. At that point, this is the way it is, and he's giving into his urges, whereas he probably should have just been single.
but
And so,
been single or been honest,
or been
like
honest.
there's so many
Exactly.
there's so many people I know that are in open marriages, or in polyamorous relationships, and the tenet of that, the way that works, is honesty, and
Hmm.
is like, is this okay with you, is this not okay with you, what are your boundaries, what are your lines? And I didn't expect to talk about this, about the Crucible, but hey, we're gonna go there. But that cornerstone is on honesty. And as
Hmm.
soon and as soon as somebody is unhappy, that's when the honesty has to happen. And clearly John Proctor didn't do that. Clearly, he wasn't happy with his wife, so he was, it takes two.
Right.
It wasn't just
Mhm.
this teenage girl. Let's be honest here.
Right.
Abigail, who starts up the whole accusations and um you know is accused of being a witch and accused of being a temptress or a seductress. She's a girl.
Hmm.
Like this is like John Proctor's wife, or Goody Proctor, I believe they call her. um
Hmm.
she's taking out her ire on this girl. you know
Right. Yeah.
so, when she should have been much more angry about at her husband, and she
Exactly.
was,
Yeah.
but that's where you're supposed to be directing your anger.
At least most of it. Yeah, not some little girl. So it's definitely not a societal pressures and what society says that was really a big thing for me in that movie. Like, man, the fact that she directed a lot of her anger towards, Abigail and her husband spoke volumes.
Right.
So speaking of love, now we're getting into like more of a happier love here. Practical magic. Oh man, so according to IMDb, it has here two witch sisters raised by their eccentric aunts in a small town face closed-minded prejudice and a curse which threatens to prevent them ever finding lasting love.
That's such a simplified version of what practical magic is to many of my witch friends. Because gosh, we were raised on this stuff. Between like the craft and practical magic, it
Right?
turned us into witches. I wanted to be Sally Owens so badly. I kept on blowing on unlit candles and trying to stir my
Yes.
coffee without touching it so
Right?
many times. But really, like the concept of curses in this movie is just so amazing and so close, I think, to the truth of what magic is, what curses is, or what curses are. Like you have
Mhm.
to um what's his name? I cannot Gary Hallett, the played by oh
Oh,
gosh, Aidan Quinn.
Aiden and Quinn. Mhm.
Yeah. Where he says, like you have to believe in curses for them to work, and I don't.
Mhm.
Like a spoiler alert for that's a little bit more towards the end of the movie. But honestly, like the ways to break curses in real witchcraft is to laugh at them, is to, don't give them the power. Don't give them the power, because the more that you give energy to a situation, the more that it grows, the more that it can hold power over you. And these poor girls, the
Mhm.
sisters, Sally and Jillian, like they've been raised to fear this curse, and they've been
Mhm.
raised to think, okay, this curse is going to take away everyone and anything that I'll ever love. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, really. Like Sally does her Amas Veritas spell about calling her true love to her, and she makes up all of these qualities that she doesn't think could possibly exist, so that she saves herself from love, because she knows that it's a powerful, dangerous thing. And then, of course, her sister goes in the opposite direction and like runs toward it because she can't wait to fall in love. So
Mhm.
it has so many wonderful themes about love and sisterhood and family and forgiveness and curses and trusting yourself and trusting your intuition. Like when the phone rings and she knows it's her sister on the other end, like
Mhm.
I've had that experience
Oh
where
yeah.
you have that connection with someone, and you know that when they're going to call, and this is of course before caller ID. So I don't know. Like I'd love to hear your thoughts on Practical Magic. It's one of my favorite movies of all time.
It is. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, and it's funny because I remember being a kid and a young adult thinking that love movies are corny, but it's that I love movies with a flair of magic.
Mm.
And the fact that Sally, I identify with Sally as well, had put in her spell, one green eye, one blue eye. I always wanted the guy with two different color eyes. And I thought that was just so funny. I'm like, okay, this is most definitely my movie. And again, we also see society, the reason why, well, I don't want to give up too much, but part of the reason why that curse exists is because it's tied into forbidden love, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so pleasing to see women not necessarily denounce their power altogether. Like I know Sally's trying not to really use her powers too much
Right.
because of
She
everything that
wants to fit
happened.
in. She
She
wants to
wants
fit
to fit
in.
in and it's just not working. But I love that they were given that space in the movie to grow. And like you said, the sisterhood and the that unconditional love that happens there, but still allowing everyone to be their own agency, but
Mm-hmm.
still come together. I think that's just so beautiful.
Yes, yes. And especially like there's a lot of lessons that can be learned from, Jillian, from her
Hmm.
from her relationship with Jimmy Angelo, and like that seductive quality where there's a connection there, but that this person is trouble, and
Hmm.
that this person is not right for you, and she needs to escape from that. Now, I wouldn't condone many of the things that these two sisters do in
Hmm.
the movie, but I mean, it really is a cautionary tale for people that fall head over heels in love and have that connection with someone, like especially during this time of year. We are recording this in February. A lot of holidays happen in February, but Valentine's Day is one of them. And I have, as a tarot reader, I have a lot of clients coming to me and asking me about soulmates or asking me about love. And it's just like, I get very cautious when it comes to those kind of connections, because a soulmate, it and that concept of twin flames or that attraction, it really causes people to make a lot of excuses for bad behavior and sometimes
Hmm.
abusive behavior as well. So we want to be very careful when we talk about these kind of connections, especially if the connection was brought about by magical means. Like, you don't
Hmm.
want to do that, because if you bring someone into your life through magic, you're probably going to have to take that person out of your life through magic too,
Yeah.
you know?
That's a great point. So throughout your practice, do you think that the movies sometimes give people a warped view? And
Yes.
okay. Mm,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I mean, it's not just magical movies either, and it's not just witchcraft movies. It's a lot of movies, especially a lot of love movies. Like, oh, everything works out in the end, or the final scene of the movie is the two main characters getting married, and it's just like, okay, well, now what? Like, that's not a guarantee of anything,
mm,
like people get divorced, people's hearts change, people
mhm,
evolve, and it's not a destination. Finding that person is not a destination. That's when the journey really
mhm.
begins.
True. And I think that's what makes this movie so unique is that it's not that picture perfect ending.
Right.
It's pretty much open-ended, and I like that. It doesn't have to be open-ended for a part two. It's just open-ended.
Right. You don't see a wedding at the end of it. You see them jumping off of a roof. Again, spoiler alert, but
But accepting who they are completely now.
right.
Um, and there was something else I was going to say about this movie and oh yeah, so also I like that there were no rules in the way. For example, the midnight margaritas. I
Uh
love that because, well, one, I'm like, okay, definitely that's going to be something I do as I get older.
yes, yes.
But but also I like that because so many times our lives can be rigid and for various reasons, our upbringing, a lot of us, we have baby boomer parents who had depression era parents, so it's a lot. This is what you eat for breakfast, this is what you eat for dinner. We don't do that. Once you get to a certain age, you stop doing these things. So I like that the aunts were, slipping the kids, like different things.
Chocolate.
Yeah, chocolates in the morning, and they had them in like margaritas and they're dancing, they're having fun. So it's just like, what? Yeah, there are rules, like, you don't want to go rob someone, right? But
Right.
really,
Right.
there are no rules. You want to make a margarita at midnight and dance your heart out, do it.
And that's a spell too, you know,
Yeah.
like I don't think people really realize, like it's just like, oh, witchcraft with blenders, yes please.
Yes, please.
Like we don't just have mortars and pestles, even though I have a collection of mortars and pestles just because I love them, and I use them. But you know, like there's nothing to say, like I really love that you brought that up. It's about writing our own rules, it's about learning the rules of magic, yes, but also learning when to break them and learning when to personalize them as well.
Mm,
That's
mm,
another big thing in this movie is they're sitting around like during that midnight margarita scene when they're reading each other's fortunes, or Jillian's reading the palms. um you know, like they don't have a book. You know, there's not like Jillian's not sitting there, you know, with a book in one hand and then the palm in the other hand, you know, like she's reading
mm,
intuitively. She's going with her feelings. And I think when you personalize your magic, that's when it can be even more powerful. And actually, I don't want to spoil it, like go back and watch it, but one of the climaxes of this movie is they're doing everything right in the big spell that they have to do at the end of the movie. They're doing everything right, and everything right is not working. And finally,
mm,
Sally just throws up her hands and says, like, all right, get everybody back in the circle. We're doing things my way now. And that ends up being the thing that breaks the curse.
mm. Yes, you're right. You're right. And I will say before I ask you your biggest takeaway is that this movie also reminds me of the saying, there's a little bit of witch in all of us, because they
Yep.
got the ladies together who were a little bit apprehensive, like, I don't know, but there was something in them that wanted to be part of something that they felt was good and right
Right.
and a little bit mysterious. So
Right.
I was like, yes.
Yes, exactly. I love that part where they're all called together and they use the phone tree and someone brings a dustbuster because they don't have a broom, and it's just like, yeah, whatever works. Like,
There
will
you
this work,
go.
you know? So,
So your biggest takeaway from practical magic?
oh gosh. Besides the fact that I just love this movie, I'll
I
I'll
know,
rewatch it. It
yeah.
doesn't even it's like one of my comfort movies. I'll rewatch it
Hmm.
whenever I'm feeling a little sad or a little like out of sorts. I'll just take it and I'll
Hmm.
watch it. And then my husband's just like, "Are you watching that again?" And I'm just like, "Just don't judge me.
Leave me alone.
Leave me alone. Leave me alone with my Owen sisters. I'll be fine." But I think it is about another quote from the movie. You can't practice magic while also looking down your nose at it, which is something
Mm,
that Sally has to come to understand, where she's running from herself. You know, she's running about from who she is and her natural talents. And like Jillian says it, she's like, all of my life I've wanted to have even half of your gifts. Like, you're
mm,
wasting yourself. And she gets so angry with that because that is her choice. It's her choice to do with her
mm,
life what she will. But it is, you know, something that she comes to realize is true, that she's not being authentic to herself, that she is not,
mm,
truly embracing who she is. So it is a movie about like these witches that have this kind of ancestral line, going back all the way to Salem, all the way to the hangings. And there's actually a very funny quote from the beginning of the movie where, one of the aunts says, well, it didn't help out that most of the wives of the husbands were on the hanging committee, so
yeah.
but it is about, like, you might have lineage, but also you don't have to have a lineage in order to be a witch or to be
Mm,
spiritual, because at the end of the movie, those suburban housewives are all coming together for a common cause, and they're embracing that side of themselves that was taboo, that was frowned upon, or that they were
mhm,
frowning upon themselves for, or frowning upon Sally and Jillian for having these gifts. So,
mhm. For me, I love the aspect of love, how it plays such a strong role in the movie, the love of family,
mm,
the love for love, then the love of wanting to protect yourself from love.
Mhm.
And then that gradual love that happened when she realized, oh my God, you have one green eye, one blue eye. And it was just so natural. And how he fell in love, or actually, let me click back so I can actually get his name. What was the officer's name? Fell in love with Sally, and really because he was reading her notes. And I'm just thinking, that's the ancient form at this point, writing a love letter. And I was just
Right.
thinking, like, how cool is it to get back to some of that, that expressiveness, you know?
Right.
So I really, for me, it was just that whole aspect of the different layers of love and the natural things that happen along the process.
Yes, absolutely. I could keep going on Practical Magic alone, but I know we have more movies to cover.
No, I was just like, oh, I know I had to catch myself because it's just such a great movie.
Hmm.
So this is the one you recommended, which I love, and I actually rewatched it. The Witches of Eastwick, and this is the one from
Yes.
1987. Three
Yes.
single women in a picturesque village have their wishes granted at a cost when a mysterious and flamboyant man arrives in their lives.
Yeah. Played by Jack Nicholson in a
Yeah, oh
very
yeah.
iconic role. Just this entire movie, and there are certain parts of this movie that I cannot rewatch. Like I have to fast forward through it. Like the cherry scene, I can't watch it. It's gross. If you
Yeah.
have if you have a very strong gag reflex, like just fast forward through that scene. Just oh god, goodness. It's awful. But I love this movie because it can really illustrate where these misconceptions of witchcraft come from. Like spoiler, Jack Nicholson. I wonder who he's playing in this movie. I mean, yes,
I
the
wonder who he's
character.
playing.
Yes, the character's name is Daryl Van Horn, and they have trouble, remembering his name at first when he comes into town, and then as soon as someone remembers his full name, that's when the goody two shoes of the town ends up falling down a staircase and nearly breaking her neck. And she's fabulous in this movie, and I think they bring her back for I think they brought her back for one of the remakes of this movie or
Mm,
some kind of version of this movie. Um, but that whole concept of witches and the devil, which we know is not true, but I still have to deal with this conception or this misconception of, oh, well, that means you worship the devil. No, no, no,
guess again.
nope. And I find it very interesting at the beginning of the movie how they're all so sick of this small town and there's no eligible men and they're all terrible or they're all getting out of relationships or divorced, and they're just like, wouldn't it be interesting if someone new came into town? And they describe their ideal man, and then they're not specific in what they're wishing for, and it ends up all being the same person. So that is a truism of magic, wrapped up in a false ism that we worship the devil. We do not. So
Right. And some of the other actresses in here are Cher, Susan Sarandon, Michelle Pfeiffer. What one of the things I loved about this movie, I'm laughing because it's just so ridiculous how Jack Nicholson is just saying, like, I want to fuck you. And I'm just
yeah.
like, he's just so direct with it. And then Cher goes off. She's like, you're not attractive. You're not charming. You're not this, but
But
she still
okay.
ends up having sex with him because it's that raw energy directness that is in all of us. But again, I'm just constantly seeing this, how society plays a part in the themes of all these movies, and one of the reasons why the three ladies share Susan and well, I should call them by their character name: Alexandra, Jane,
Alexandra,
Alexandra,
Jane,
Jane,
and
Suki,
Suki.
Suki.
Yes.
The reason why they were just so over it because, as you were saying, the guys were pretty much the same. They were
Yep.
horrible, no good, cookie cutter, and they wanted that rawness, that raw energy. That even just going to talk a little bit about goddesses. Some goddesses have that raw energy, Freya, and then you have ones
Mm-hmm.
that are a little bit softer, like Kuan Yin. And they are the women that want that more of that raw, direct energy. But again, society was kind of numbing them to the point that they just got finally tired of it and they were ready to wake up. And that also leads to manifestation.
Right.
They weren't
Right.
quite specific, but they kind of sort of got the guy they
They
wanted. So
got what they
keep that in
wanted.
mind.
They got what they wanted. I had to look up that quote that Cher or Alex says to that character. You are the most unattractive man I have ever met in my entire life. You've demonstrated every loathsome characteristic of the male personality and even discovered a few new ones. You are physically repulsive, intellectually retarded, you're morally reprehensible, vulgar, insensitive, selfish, stupid, you have no taste, a lousy sense of humor, and you smell. You're not even interesting enough to make me sick. So, the next time you have someone in your life that you're just like, go on, get gone, remember this quote from Cher's character in The Witches of Eastwick. But then she ends up going to bed with him anyway. So, you know, I don't know if it's the writing, if that's just scripted to happen, or if it's just Jack Nicholson. There's something about Jack Nicholson.
There's something about Jack Nicholson. I think there's something about people who live unapologetically,
Mm.
right or wrong. And when I say wrong, I don't mean like they go on a killing spree wrong. I mean, oh, they were drinking and cussing. Oh my gosh. Like that type of wrong. Even dancing. Some people are like, oh my gosh, they were dancing.
Mm-hmm.
So there is something to be said about that. And I think it's just that raw energy of this is who I am. And because I claim all of this, no one can really step inside my bubble here. Like this
Right.
is my world. And I think that's where that attraction comes from because we all want to live our truth and show up as our true selves. But again, we got to get over that society barrier, among other things.
Right, right, exactly. And I mean there's some really great points in this movie too about I guess kitchen witchcraft or
Hmm.
folk magic that they do bring into it, which can be true, like the wax poppet that they make together
Hmm.
when they're ready or they've realized who Daryl Van Horn actually is and that they need to get rid of him, basically. But I think I just really love this movie for the strength of the three female leads.
Hmm.
That they're friends, but they're almost sisters in a way that their own families didn't provide for them. You
Hmm.
have Suki, who is overwhelmed and has had so many kids. I don't even know how many kids she has. 7 perhaps.
A
But
lot, yeah.
they've created this family, and they end up adding Daryl to their family, and they're all living in this mansion together, and it's like it's what works for them, and they're completely happy with him, despite what other people are saying, despite what the townsfolk are saying. Like they're like, this is my family. This is like, I don't care right or wrong. Like, this is my family. These are the people that I love, and these are the people that I will protect and be there for. So in a way, it is a very, I know it sounds weird, but it can be a really strong portrayal of, if your family or your biological family isn't there for you or hasn't been there for you, there's no reason that your friends can't be a family, or that you can't find your
Hmm.
heart family or create your own family.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And just as you were saying, it really, I got the feeling too that they really were more like sisters than friends. And instead of attacking each other, like, oh my gosh, like how could you be with the same guy? Because he really did, in his twisted way, charm them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they were just like, it's him.
Right, right. And
You
notice
know?
they didn't really argue about it. They weren't fighting over him in any way. Like maybe at first there was a little
Mhm.
bit of competition, but I think that, again, like what you were saying about society when we were talking about the crucible, like societally we're taught to fight over
Mhm.
resources, to fight over men or women or whoever or whatever love interest that we have. And they might have done it at first, but within a few scenes, or within a collage or a montage,
Hmm.
they become a family, and there is no fighting over this one man.
Hmm. So, your biggest takeaway from Witches of Eastwick?
Ooh. I was thinking about this before we started recording, because there is, again, so many in this. But what I
Hmm.
think the Witches of Eastwick really teaches us is that the power doesn't come from somebody else; it comes from within us. Like, they
Hmm.
brought him to
Yep.
that town. They brought him to Eastwick, and they took him out of Eastwick.
Hmm.
Like, the power wasn't inherent to him. Like, all of these things started to happen because they brought him in and because he was in Eastwick, but they're the ones that got him there. So, and once they realize their own power and that it's inherent to them, they realize it wasn't coming from him at all. They gave him that power. It was from them.
Yes, and I was trying to Google this quote because Jack Nicholson talks about, like, in his, again, crazy way, because he's the devil. He talks about praising women.
Yes.
Do you remember that? I'm trying to find this. I'm just going to mute myself really quickly and see if I can.
I've
Because I'm
got
going
the
to type this in there. Oh,
quotes.
you
I've
you
got
have
the
it? Oh,
quotes.
great,
Yeah.
great, great. Do you have that quote where he's like praising women? He's
Well,
basically saying,
there's two there's a couple of times he does it, a couple of times in the movie. He says, like, I like women, I admire them, but if you want me to treat you like a dumb twit, I will. Like, oh gosh, but it's like, I see men running around trying to put their dicks into everything, trying to make something happen, but it's women who are the source, the only power. Nature, birth, rebirth. Cliche, sure, but true. So he says
yes.
that, and then he says, when, again, one of the climaxes of the movie, do you think God knew what he was doing when he created woman?
Mm.
Was it a mistake, like tidal waves, earthquakes, floods? But I think the quote that you were looking for is probably the first one. It is women who are the
Mhm.
source.
Yes, that was one of my biggest takeaways because they reclaimed their power. They had that sisterhood, just as you were saying. They brought them in there, they took them out,
Yep.
and they created their own environment, their own lives. So that was my biggest takeaway, is that we can really create what we want in our lives. We can really bring in what we want into our lives, and it's not so much where we are at
Mm-hmm.
times. And
Mm-hmm.
I get that, everybody's has a different living circumstance, but we have so much power. And I like that, even though he's the devil and he has all this, power too, he's like, no, 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 it's the women.
It's the women. Yeah, absolutely. And another, like, secondary point about the Witches of Eastwick is just because someone is attractive and sometimes that magnetic quality, that doesn't mean that person is good for you. Like, hello,
Mhm.
he's the devil.
Right. You can just be horny, so double check.
Yes.
Double check. Which leads me to The Craft.
Oh
A,
boy.
a newcomer Catholic prep high school falls, I can't even read right now, falls in with a trio of outcast teenage girls who practice witchcraft, and they soon conjure up various spells and curses against those who anger them. And
Yes.
this is the one from 1996.
Yes, not the new one.
Not
Not
the
the new
new
one.
one. Not the new one.
I haven't seen the new one yet. I don't know if I will, because there are so many people that I know that are practicing witches now that got into witchcraft because of this movie. And I
Mm,
know it seems silly, and I know it seems cliche, and for definite there is a lot of Hollywood glamorizing and misconceptions going on in this movie. But there are some kernels of truth in it as well.
mhm,
And they did have, I believe, a witchcraft expert on the set to
mhm,
run things past. But this movie, it's just campy, it's fun, it's about being the outcast, it's about taking back power when you are the outcast.
mhm.
And yeah, just like, I think one of the taglines is like, she has the power, or they have the power, like, for the when they were promoting the movie
Mhm.
originally. And
Yeah, I'm trying to
also,
see if I can see it here. There's the photo.
Welcome to the
Welcome
witching
to the
hour.
witching hour. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. And also the actress who plays Rochelle, Rachel True, she just came out with the tarot deck.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, you've got some, you've got some, not necessarily typecasting going on, but you have people that are experts that have unusual practices or unusual hobbies like tarot, actually in this movie. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little bit sad that there was no appearance of the tarot really in the craft, but it's the craft, not the tarot reader. But yeah, just like that whole concept of, so Sarah is the newcomer into the new school, and she meets Nancy, Bonnie, and Rochelle, and they become a coven of four. And you have Bonnie's character. They're all like very, it's a very ensemble cast, but each of the different characters have their own issues that they're going through. And then
Mm-hmm.
together they kind of figure out how to address those issues, whether it's racism, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's learning to love oneself after a horrific fire and having scars, whether it's recovering from a suicide attempt or depression, whether it's being white trash in the case of Nancy and living in a trailer and being like kind of embarrassed by their upbringing or their situation. Like they all have different problems, but they all come together to try and solve those problems using witchcraft. And they don't start doing that at first. Like when you see them in the movie at first, they're just going out and communing with nature. They're not really
Mm-hmm.
asking for much until they start asking for more. So
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting to see the evolution of, just being reverent and being wanting to be in nature, and then asking for more and more and more, and then having it all taken away because they abuse their gifts or they abuse
Mm-hmm.
their powers. So
Yeah, so many great points. I love, excuse me, I love the dynamics of each character. And I like that because it's showing a blend of the mundane, and I'm just saying the mundane as just separate from magical,
mhm,
because what they're going through really isn't mundane, but it's so easy to want to go right into magic and do all this stuff and forget about everything else. So
mhm.
I'm glad that you said it didn't start off like that right away, which is true. I remember the one scene where Rachel True's character Rochelle, she had what was it? She had curly hair, and the one girl goes, "Oh, this must be one of Rochelle's naps," and I was like, "Oh."
Oh,
Oh, like I felt that, so again, you got high school setting, and so you got girls who are discovering themselves, they're going through things, and along comes this magical thing that's really within all of us anyway. And now the true exploration begins, but first they had to deal with, the mundane stuff. How can they possibly dive into their magic if they're going through these things that they're trying to address? And that's where we see some of the abuse happen, is because, some people think others are doing better, but they're dealing with their own stuff too. And sometimes you don't recognize, or you think you start to weigh who's doing worse,
right.
and then now you got a riff in the group.
Exactly. And I just think it's very interesting about the concept of power and the concept of magic. Notice how they were a coven of three before Sarah comes along,
Mhm.
and you see Bonnie leaning up against the lockers looking at the farmer's almanac basically and saying, oh well, today is portending or predicting a day of balance. Perhaps we'll find our fourth, like they're like,
Mhm.
that's how the movie begins. They're looking for their fourth person because they feel like they have to have a fourth person in order to do real spells, and
Mhm.
everything that they've been doing up until that point has not been working because they don't
Mhm.
have their fourth. They don't have a representation of all four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Well, it can be about balance, that's true, but for them to have that concept of we're not complete, we need to have this in order to do our magic, that's kind of faulty. Like that's
Right.
like saying I can't cast a spell because I don't have this one ingredient.
Right.
Like that's more of an excuse because the real spell, the real magic is within you.
Right. Right. Even if you are a solitary practitioner and you want to work with the element, you would have incense, you'll have a bowl of water. Like you would find a way to have the elements there. You wouldn't say, "Oh, I don't have three other people." So
Right.
like anything really can represent an element or a
Right.
substitute for it. So yeah, that's definitely something that is Hollywood.
Yeah. And they also and they give the power away. As soon as Sarah shows up, they're just like, you're making it happen. It's you. It's you. And she's
Mhm.
like, it's not. It's not. Like she is very um she is accepting but also not accepting of her own inherent magic. And there's a scene um where they call her a natural witch because she says it's always getting messed up. I
Mhm.
picture rain and then a pipe bursts, or I want it to be quiet and then I go deaf for 3 days straight. Like,
Mhm.
and these are very actual real life examples of what can happen if your intention is that powerful. And this is actually something that I teach when I teach spell casting and when I teach tarot for spell casting is there are three elements of any spell. There is the intention, there is the vehicle, and there is the energy. The intention is the most important thing. Sometimes, if you're very adept at spell casting, intention is all you really need. So you need to make that
Mhm.
intention a good one. Otherwise, things can start happening without sage, without incense, without a magic wand, without
Yeah.
a vehicle or a poppet or a candle, because your intention is so strong, the spell will just go on its own. So that's an example, or like a fictionalized example, but I've had those kinds of things happen to me where I've had an intention that's really strong. So it's not necessarily that Sarah is a natural witch. It's just she's very in tune with her intentions, but she always mentions it goes wrong. So she needs to be able to focus it. But
Right.
it doesn't come until the end of the movie where she's really in tune with all that she is, and she's tapped into her full power, because up until then she's really denying it. It's
Mhm.
like this worst version of humbleness I've ever seen, where she's just like, no, no, it's not me, it's not me, because to some degree it isn't her. It is the power that her three coven sisters have given to her when as soon as she showed up and tipped that pencil and moved that pencil around on the desk, and it's just like, ooh, powerful, like use your witchcraft for something other than that.
Right. No, yeah, exactly. And I love that there was a well thought out timeline, because if she had got all her powers in the middle of the movie, I think it would have cheapened the movie, because in this path there's constant growth. And we have good days, we have bad days, and again, it's one of the things like, yeah, I'm still learning. I do one thing and something else happens. I don't completely get it. So, and of course, they go to different events, and people. I don't want to give up too much, even though this movie been out
People
since
get
forever.
hurt. People
People
get
get
hurt.
hurt, people get upset, people get hurt, and there's that coming together, or a self-awareness at the end, that's just like, wait a minute, you guys wanted me in the coven. I don't even need you guys.
Right.
And when you come to that point when you realize who you don't need, and it was a little bit, even though this wasn't their intention, a little bit abusive to say, oh yeah, okay, here's our power now. You do something with it. You make us whole. It's like, wait a minute. I'm trying to figure this out myself here. So
Right.
they wanted to welcome her, but it was almost like a conditional love. Like, we want you in our circle because we think you could do something for
For
us that we've
us.
been trying to do for so long.
Right, exactly, exactly. And she said, and Sarah comes to that realization where, as soon as she disagrees with them, it becomes this shunning
Hmm.
almost, where it's just like, if a witch betrayed her coven, they would kill her, and it's just like this sisterhood that she thought she had. She disagreed with them one time, and then all of a sudden they turned on her, and it was very much a cautionary tale of like what have you done for me lately, almost
Mhm.
in a very witchy way. And I always love the scenes where they go back to the witchcraft shop, where I believe her name is Lyria, who has all of the lessons, and they're not really
Mhm.
heeding her because it's all fun and glamorous and everything. And she was just like, and then Sarah brings it up later, like, what about balance? Remember what she said about balance? And they're just
Mhm.
like, I've been a monster. I'm having fun. I'm sorry you don't like that I'm having fun. And it's just like, there's nothing wrong with having fun, but you go from someone, in the case of Bonnie, who's completely shy and covering up her entire body because of her scars, to becoming a
Mhm.
total narcissist.
Mhm.
So, it very much is, power can bring out your inherent personality or what you already had inside of you. It doesn't
Right.
change who you were to begin with, really.
Absolutely. And also, it reminds me of, especially when you're just starting out and you have your tarot cards, you go somewhere and people want you to read for them all the time.
All the
And
time.
one time you don't want to do it, and it's like you're the most horrible, no good, very bad person ever to walk the face of the earth.
Yes. Yes.
It's like that. Like my
Yes.
heart went out to Sarah sometimes because it's like she didn't ask for that. She recognizes that she has some gifts that she's like, all right, yeah, I say this and then I go deaf for 3 days. And
Right.
it's in real life, you're not obligated
Right.
to do this, so
Right.
that's
Right.
another thing.
And I mean, it is a really wonderful lesson in boundaries, especially when that happens to you. You kind of want to set up your boundaries before that happens to you, because you're going to lose friendships because of it. Like
Mhm.
I didn't do that, and I lost one of my best friends from childhood because she would always want me to read her cards, and we would go out to dinner or go out for drinks and dinner, and then she would inevitably, within 5 minutes of us sitting down, did you bring your cards with you?
Yep.
And it's just like, I want to know about your life. I want to be your friend. I don't want to be like this. It's part of the reason why I don't really read a lot for my friends anymore. Or if my friends are readers or are witches, they understand that there is a delineation there, and they will book a reading just like everybody
Mhm.
else.
Right.
So yeah, The Craft can be a great movie to watch when when you feel like everyone's trying to take a piece out of you or get something out of you, and bringing that power back to yourself, and setting those boundaries.
Absolutely. Your biggest takeaway. I know there are many. It's hard.
Oh gosh, for The Craft, intention is everything,
Mm.
really. Intention is everything. It is the real driver for any spell. So, and also being careful what you wish for, because I
Mm.
think Sarah probably put out that intention before she moved, that she wanted like-minded people. She
Yeah.
wanted to be seen. She wanted to be loved as well.
Mhm.
We have only glimpses of her depression and of
Mhm.
her background, but you don't see any past scenes from Sarah's previous life before
Right.
she moved. The only thing that you see is just Sarah herself alone. So we have to come to assume that she invited this group of girls into her life too. So just be
Mhm.
be careful, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it.
Yeah, and, now I'm even wondering if maybe she was at her previous high school and some of the things she was doing, her magic was going wrong and they had to move, and she said, "I wanna move to a place where I'll be accepted," and but it kinda went south.
Right.
So for me, I loved the scene where they were at the ocean,
Mm.
and I think it was Nancy who called the watchtowers. And I thought, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing." I love that you didn't see the watchtowers, or I think she also said like him, like I can feel him. I'm glad that you didn't see it.
Yes.
You saw you saw the end result and you felt what she felt, because that's accurate. Like, yeah, you do see from time to time, but the magic, you'll see the end result. You'll
Right.
feel it, you'll embrace it, and and again, as you were saying earlier, you got to be careful what you wish for. When you start to be greedy and not be responsible with it, then it goes south. But just that initial, and I said it because, the animal, but
Yes.
um, just that initial connection with the ocean, and they're outside, and she's connecting with the watchtower. I'm like, yes, that's actually the main reason why I was like, I want to work with watchtowers. Not then because I didn't understand it, but later on when I was studying spirituality, and it just kind of brought back that memory. I'm like, oh yes, 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 and now I love it.
And there are some, like, this is the reason why I love looking up movie trivia on Internet Movie Database, where we're using to refresh our memory for some of the actor names or the character names. There is a story in the trivia section of For the Craft where that particular scene, they had to refilm that or do reshoots on that because the fictional god, that they're calling to, sounds very, very close to Manannán, the Gaelic god of the sea.
Mm,
So, and they were using, that's real terminology for listeners. We will sometimes call the quarters, using "Hail to the powers of the watchtowers of the west," of water, of emotion, of intuition, of flow, hail and welcome. That's a real quarter calling, or can be. Um, but the witch consultant, there was fog, there was the real language, and then when Nancy invokes Manon, there was a flock of bats that hovered over the set. The tide rose dramatically. The candles went out, and Manon sounds very close to Manon, god of the sea. So every time the girls started the ceremony, and only when they would start the ceremony, the waves would start coming up tremendously fast.
wow,
And then and
that's
then
amazing.
and that's coming from the witch consultant Pat Devon and the director Andrew Fleming. He said right at when Nancy says her line, "Manon, fill me," right at that exact moment, we lost power.
Wow, that is
So
interesting.
the things that you feel when you watch that scene, it's, I'm sure there wasn't lightning. I'm sure that lightning was edited in,
Mhm.
but the wind, the waves, like that came about because they were using the real language. They were using the
Wow.
real words. So be careful, and be careful when you're working with deities as well.
Mhm.
Like, don't presume to call them, to order them around, to invoke them. Like, you are welcoming them. You are asking them to work with you. You are
Right.
not ordering them around, because they will shake you like a bull.
Mhm. Mhm.
Don't mess with deity, especially if you have a personal connection with the deity, or if you're in training to be a priest or priestess of that deity. Like, do not order them around. They don't like that. They want to work with you. They don't like being ordered around, and you shouldn't. Like, that's very presumptuous. So
Mhm. Absolutely. Whew, what a great conversation.
yeah, we can
Oh
keep
man.
going.
I know, right? I can keep going. Well, this is part one. So, we have more movies, of course, to discuss, but I just want to say, you know, thank you for this because there are definitely some overarching themes with these movies, witchcraft movies, and they do play pretty, I don't want to say intricate, but they're in the witchy community. There's something to be said about that because they definitely influence people from time to time, but also it gives people a glimpse into our paths, even though some of it is a little bit glamorized for Hollywood. But it's pretty cool that these movies are still a thing 20 some odd years later, 30 some odd years later. So thank you for coming on and having this conversation with me.
Thank you for having me. It was so much fun. And I can't wait to talk about more witchy movies and sorting fact from fiction, or sometimes just celebrating how cheesy or how
Yeah.
how right or how wrong they can be.
Yes, absolutely. Anything else you would like to say about the movies, and any other things you want to talk about, how people can reach you and so forth?
Oh, well, you can just reach me at my website, tarotbyhilary.com. That's Hillary with one L. If you put in two L's, you're going to find somebody else. And I love to talk about these topics, not just tarot, witchcraft, divination, what's right, what's wrong. And, you know, that's the reason why I do these podcasts. It's super super fun, and I also have a podcast as well that I do with two other tarot readers. It's called Card Slingers Coast to Coast, and you can find that wherever you get your podcasts.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And as a recap, that was the Crucible, Practical Magic, the Witches of Eastwick, and the Craft. And of course, these are the older ones. So from the 80s and the early
90s.
90s, the 90s, the Crucible from 96, Practical Magic from 87, or excuse me, 97. I was thinking of Eastwick. From 98, Witches of Eastwick, and
87.
87, yeah. And the Crab from 90s. 96 was a good year, huh? For
Yeah.
two of them. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for being on the show. I am sending everyone listening so many blessings. I am rooting for you as always. Remember to be kind to yourself. Please share this episode with someone who needs to watch or rewatch these movies. Until next time. As always, Spiritual Trailblazer, thank you for tuning in. Do make sure to stop by and visit me at tiamariejohnson.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe. Last but not least, be kind to yourself. I'm rooting for you, and I'm sending you so many blessings. Until next time.